Okay, part 3. Down here at the bottom of the folder of Wednesday, the 9th, we have 2 files. Notions of the Modern Self and Emily Dickinson, I'm Nobody. You probably have heard that poem sometime in your elementary years or even in high school. So we'll get to that in just a sec. Notions of the Modern Self. This is one of the secondary themes that's running throughout the whole course. Examining the human condition and examining how the world and how artists in the world conduct their artistic expression, their literature, and display the sense, the notion of self. What does it mean to be an individual in society? Okay? Or how to be an individual in the global community. That's what literature is all about. The human condition and examination of the self. Those two things. Okay. Now, the whole point here is we're creating a foundation towards your college career. So although you are a sophomore in this class, a sophomore in college credits, we are building how you're going to survive those years at college. Having a strong sense of identity, self-identity, is beneficial to surviving college. Knowing what you want, where you're going, who you are, or at least having a strong concept of what you're aiming to do, what you're trying to transform, these work. Your perceptions of reality are influenced by your self-identity. So when you ask the question, who am I, and what do I want to be when I grow up, these are the foundations of what every child goes through. That's where, well, even today, as an ancient old man that I am, I still ask these questions. Okay? It just comes with the territory of being human. You're examining why, or you're not examining, you're questioning why you do the things you do. So, all literature does this, ancient and modern, they deal with these similar themes. Examination of the self and the placement of the self within the universe. So, as we go along, whenever I throw at you material to read, always examine the protagonist, how they're presented to you. How does this character relate to other characters? How do they relate to supernatural forces? How do they relate to unfolding circumstances? How do they react to conflict is really what it comes down to. How do they understand notions of what is the universe, of the universal definitions of identity, of humanity? And most important, how do they react to themselves? How is their personality affecting all these qualities? So the papers you're building in this semester and next semester, it's all about the analysis of characters and how or why the authors are presenting their protagonist. So it's going to be subtle or it's going to be overt. But either which way, that's up to your critical opinion, your critical observations. You get to pick. You're analyzing the characters. You are deciding how subtle and how overt the author's message is about humanity through this protagonist. And these type of questions will aid you on the way. So I based this off a diagram I found online, and it really sums up the whole concept of what we're doing here. The self, your individuality, your sense of humanity, personal humanity, your day-to-day thoughts, your personality, what makes you you. That's that big gold circle in the middle. In order to get a confident self, okay, this self influences your self-perception, your thoughts, your day-to-day activities, and how your thinking process influences the activities. That develops your perception, your evaluation of who you are. This, in turn, affects your self-esteem, how you feel about yourself, your placement in society, which affects your social self, the way you present yourself socially, which could be totally radically different than the way you present to yourself privately. Private versus public is an argument that you'll see in a lot of writing. The private self is often radically different than the public self. So this social self affects self-knowledge, what you know about yourself, or what you aim to maintain about yourself. Another way of looking at it. And this self-knowledge, your conscious thoughts, not your subconscious, but your conscious thoughts, are affecting your self-perception. So it's an ongoing cycle. Each of these four qualities affect each other and become that whole definition you see of yourself. So rather quickly, to sum this up, in both the ancient world and the modern world, there are examples of authors establishing what it means to be an individual. What's interesting when you look at the characters that are presented to you, they are somewhat in a transformation process to this modern definition. Okay? So, there is an argument out there that the Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre is the first example of a modern character in terms of contemporary. The 1847 is the beginning of contemporary self, how we view ourselves. We're very aware of our thought process and our actions. Whereas if you look at King Lear in William Shakespeare's play, that character redefined what it means to be. I'm trying to sum this up very quickly. In a moment of trauma and conflict, how a self will transform right in front of you. And how you, as an individual in this tragedy, are attempting to rectify wrongs, fix problems. And you may already know the term existential. King Lear goes through an existential crisis. So when we get to King Lear, I'll break that down in more detail. But William Shakespeare presents this king in this moment of trauma in a very different manner that's never been achieved all these years before him. Okay? Just like the way Muhammad and the Jesus figure present self in a radically different fashion, in position of how an individual is affected by the God figure. It was not to give away too much details early, but the individual for Jesus and for Muhammad is basically, there's you and God. The royalty factor wasn't a part of the faction. You see what I'm saying? There's no one between you and God. So that was yet another milestone, or stepping stone towards realization of the individuality, the importance of an individual. So likewise, in the ancient world, Aristotle presented new theories, Plato presented new theories, and when we get to Gilgamesh, that presents an interesting theory. So all of these writings that we'll be going over look at how they present an individual and how they recognize their self, their importance, to the plot that's shown to you. Okay. So, when you get the chance, do read over Emily Dickinson's I'm Nobody. I always love this poem. It's short, sweet, it's pithy. It's got an interesting point. I just wanted you to be aware it does apply to what we're doing in class. Okay, so think about this for a while. We'll talk about it in the near future. Okay, this is like a preview of what's coming down the path. Okay, so I'm going to break it here, and there'll be one last video for the exercise. Okay, it's a short, sweet, quick exercise. See you in a few seconds.